Good day, my grade 6 learners. Welcome to our virtual class in science. So today, we are already in the second grading period. So this whole second grading, we will be focusing on the living things and their environment. So our topic for the whole duration of second grading are interesting, I'll tell you. So if in the previous grading, the topics are interesting too, this second grading, it's more interesting. Okay, so you just have to listen attentively and participate for you to absorb all the lessons, not just by mind, but also by heart. Now, may I present to you first the objectives of today's lesson. So these are the things you need to know. After going through this lesson, you are expected to identify the major parts of the skeletal system, explain how each organ of the skeletal system works together, describe the parts of the integumentary system, explain how each part of the integumentary system works together, name the major parts of the digestive system, and explain how each part of the digestive system works together. Okay, so these are the things that you need to know in this lesson. Now, I have one question for you. Where do you think life begins? Where do life begins? An idea? All right. So we have levels of organization of life class. Okay? Now, before we dig deeper with our lesson today, may I just present to you first the levels of organization of life. Now, the answer for the question, where do life begins, is life begins with the protoplasm. So there are different levels of organization of life. And this is represented by the acronym PCTOOOPCEB. Now, what does this PCTOOOPCEB mean? What does this mean? So, this simply means that life begins with a protoplasm. So when we say protoplasm class, it is a jelly-like substance that make up a cell. Again, it is a jelly-like living substance that make up a cell. In other words, class, there will be no cells without protoplasm. Why? Because cell now class is the basic unit of life. Okay? So these cells class will be working together, and when these cells are grouped together, they will perform a specific function. Okay? And when these cells are grouped together, this will form tissues. Okay? So tissues now class are group of cells performing a specific functions. Now, when these tissues perform also a specific function and group together, they will form organs. Okay? So organs now are group of tissues performing a specific functions. Now, when these organs are again grouped together and they will again perform a specific function, it will form an organ system. Okay? So organ systems are group of organs performing a specific functions. Okay? And these organ systems class will be grouped together in order to form organisms. So again, organisms are group of organ systems performing a specific functions. Now, when organisms are being grouped together and perform a specific function, ano kaya ang mabubuo? It will form population. Okay, so group of organisms performing a specific function, that is population. Now, when this population is being grouped together and perform a specific function, what will it form? It will form a community. So again, community, this is a group of population performing a specific function. Now, When this community will be grouped together, this will form an ecosystem. When we say ecosystem, it is an interaction of living and non-living organisms within a community. Okay, so this is group of community performing a specific function. Now, when ecosystem is grouped together, this will form the so-called world of life, and that is the biosphere. Okay, so from the word bio, so bio, it means life. So this biosphere is the layer of the earth where life exists. Okay, so those are the levels of organization of life. We have the acronym PCTOOO para mas hindi nyo makalimutan. All right? So there are levels of organization of life within and outside of the organism. Take note of that. Now, what is our basis para malaman natin kung ano yung mga levels outside at levels within the organism? So our basis here, class, is the organism. Now, saan ang organism dito? The third O. Okay, so that is our basis. So the levels of organization of life within an organism are PCTOO. Okay, so that is protoplasm, cells, tissues, organs, and organ systems. So those are the levels within an organism. Now, what are the levels of organization of life outside the organism? So, we have the PCEB, that is population, community, ecosystem, and the biosphere. Okay, so those are the levels of organization of life within and outside an organism. Okay, so again, life begins with a protoplasm. Okay, so don't forget the acronym for the levels of organization of life, that is PCTOOOPCEB. Okay, so this morning class, we are going to focus on the different systems of the human body, such as skeletal system, integumentary system, and digestive system. Okay, so first we have the first system, that is the skeletal system. Now, I want you to do this one, class. I want you to press your knees. Kindly do it. All right, next. Okay, class, next. Gently press the side of your wrist. Okay, kindly do it. And lastly, gently press the top of your head. Do it. Now, what do you feel, class? Very good. Okay, so those are all your bones. Okay, so the human body, class, is made up of different kinds of bones. And this forms the framework of your body called the skeleton. Okay, so what is a skeletal system? When we say skeletal system, it gives the body structural support and shape. So meaning it holds the body as one, and it allows our body also to move freely. So just like what I have said a while ago, class, it serves as the framework of the body. Okay, because without this framework, class, of course, our body might collapse as well as our structure. Now, I have a question. Do you have any idea how many bones do we have, class? Okay, so we have 206 bones in our body as adult, but take note, class, babies or infants have about 300 bones. Okay, so as we grow old, class, and become adult, our bones are fused together. That's why an adult has only 206 bones. Okay, and of course, these bones, class, work together as a system. That's why we call it a skeletal system. Now, what are the functions of the skeletal system? Okay, So we have first the body support, second, facilitation of movement, third, protection of internal organs, fourth, storage of minerals and fats, and the last one, blood cell formation. So these are the major functions of the skeletal system class. So first, we go to body support. Okay, so the skeletal system works as a body support for the whole body. Okay, so it enables us to stand upright and maintain an erect position or posture. Okay, so what does this mean? So the skeletal system class determines the general shape of our body, just like us males. Okay, so the male develops a broad shoulder than females. Okay, while female naman forms wide hips, okay, balakang, and also lips. Okay? And lahat ng yan ay dahil sa skeletal system. Alright? The next function class is the facilitation of movement. Okay, so the skeletal system provides an attachment for the muscles which makes body movement possible. Why? That is because class, the bones are attached to the muscles. Okay? So we can able to move freely. Okay, we can walk, we can jog, we can run. Okay, so we can do those things because of our bones and our muscles. Okay, so again, class, our muscles are attached to our bones. That's why we can move freely. All right? Okay, so the next function class is protection of internal organs. Okay, so just like our skull class, ano ba ang pinoprotect ng skull natin? Yes, very good, our brain. So the skull protects our brain, which is the very important part of our body. Okay? Also our ribs. Ano kayang pinoprotect ng ating ribs? Very good. So our ribs protect our lungs and our heart. Okay, now can you get it? That's why one of the major functions of skeletal system is protection of internal organs. So without this, hindi mapoprotect ang ating brain, which is the very important part of our body. And of course, hindi mapoprotect ang ating lungs and ang ating heart, okay, without the ribs. Alright, now can you get it, class? Okay, so next is the skeletal system serves as the storage of minerals and fats. Alright, so the skeletal system class stores important minerals like calcium and phosphorus, releases them to the blood, and these minerals like calcium and phosphorus class make our bones strong. So it is needed for the body class to make protein for growth and cell repair. Okay, so that's how important our bones are because it stores a lot of minerals and fats. Okay, and one of the most important functions of skeletal system class is for the blood cell formation. So our blood class is composed of white blood cells, red blood cells, and platelets. Okay, now, my question, class, is, where do these cells come from? Saan ba nanggaling tong mga to? What do you think? Very good. So, in our bones, particularly in the bone marrow. Okay, so the bone marrow class manufactures or produces the red blood cells and of course, the white blood cells. Take note of that. And also take note, class, that the red blood cell is the one responsible for giving oxygen in our body. Okay, don't forget that one. So these are the 5 major functions of our skeletal system. Now, class, skeletal system is divided into 2. Okay, so it has 2 types. Now, what are those? So first, we have the axial skeleton, which is the red part in the moving picture. So these are the parts included in the axial skeleton class. And also, we have the appendicular skeleton. So these are the parts, class, that are included in the appendicular skeleton. Okay? So let's have first the axial skeleton. Okay, so the axial skeleton class includes the skull, the vertebral column, the sternum, and the ribs. Okay, take note class, yung vertebral column, we call it also as vertebrae or the spinal column. Alright, so these bones class form the axis or the framework of the trunk and the head. Okay, so in other words class, it protects the delicate organs in the body. Okay, so that is our axial skeleton. Okay, so what are again the parts under axial skeleton? We have the skull, the vertebral column, or we call it also as spinal column or vertebrae. We have sternum and we have the ribs. Right. So on the other hand, we have appendicular skeleton. Okay, and this includes the bones of the shoulder, arms and hands, our hips, and the legs and the feet. Okay, so these are the parts of the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. So on the left side class are the parts of the axial skeleton, and on the right side, these are the parts of the appendicular skeleton. So as you can see class, the parts of the axial skeleton are the skull. We also have the mandible. This is our mandible class, the jawbone. Okay, we also have sternum, ribs, and the vertebral column, or what we call the vertebrae. Okay, so on the other hand, the parts that are included in the appendicular skeleton are, first we have the clavicle. Okay, so take note class that clavicles are also known as our collarbone. Take note of that. Clavicle is also known as our collarbones. Okay, next we also have the scapula. We also have the humerus. Okay, we also have the ulna and the radius. Take note, this is the ulna and this is the radius. Next, we also have the carpals, the metacarpals, and the phalanges. Okay, so ito yung carpals natin class. And above that are the metacarpals. Okay, and this is our phalanges. Alright, next we also have the femur. Okay, and don't you know class that the longest bone in our body is the femur. Okay, so don't forget that one class. Again, the longest bone in our body is femur. Okay, so kung may longest bone tayo, mayroon din tayong smallest bone. So saan kaya natin matatagpuan ang ating smallest bone? Alright, so our smallest bone class can be found in our ear, and that is the stapes. Okay, take note, the smallest bone in our body can be found in our ear, particularly the stapes. And our longest bone in the body is the femur. Okay, next we have the patella. So that is our kneecap now. Alright, and we also have the tibia and the fibula. Alright? Now, so magkalapit lang sila as you can see. And of course, we have the tarsals, the metatarsals, and the phalanges of our feet. So, dito ang tarsals natin class. And above that, we have the metatarsals and the phalanges. Okay? So again, these are the different parts of our axial and the appendicular skeleton. Okay? Now class, our bones are classified into 4. Okay, so we have 4 classifications of our bones. First, we have the long bones. Second, short bones. Third, the flat bones. And the fourth one are the regular bones. Okay, now let's first go to the long bones. Okay, now what are the examples of these long bones? Okay, so we have the humerus, the radius, the ulna, the metacarpal, metatarsal, the phalanges, the tibia, the fibula, and the femur. Right? So in other words, class, long bones can be found in our limbs like arms and legs. Take note of that. Again, long bones can be found in our limbs like arms and legs. All right? Now, second, we have the short bones, and these includes the tarsals and the carpals. Okay, so in other words, class, short bones can be found in our wrists, and ankles. Okay? Now, third, we have the flat bones. And these includes, we have the cranial bones, the sternum, the scapulae, the ribs. And the last one, class, is the irregular bone. And this includes, class, the vertebrae. So again, class, these are the four classifications of our bones. Okay? So what are those again? We have long bones, short bones, flat bones, and irregular bone. Okay, so we said a while ago, class, that skull is one of the parts of actual skeleton. Okay, so what is a skull? So a skull consists of cranium and facial bones. So ilan kayang bones mayroon ang cranium as well as our face? Ilan kayang bones meron tayo? So the cranium, class, is made up of 8 bones joined together to form a rigid case that protects the brain. Okay? So, in other words, class, the brain is protected by our skull. Okay? And as we all know, that our brain is a very delicate organ. Okay? And it's very important since this controls all the body processes and all our body movements. Okay? So, what protects our brain again? It's the skull. Alright? And also, the face is made up of different bones, and the face has 14 facial bones. Okay, so the mandible here, or what we call the jawbone, that is a movable bone that holds the teeth. Okay, so that is the function of our mandible, or what we call the jawbone. Okay, so that holds our teeth. It is a movable bone that holds our teeth. So another part of our actual skeleton, class, is the spinal column, or what we call the vertebral column. So let me just read this one. The spinal column or vertebrae, such as the neck and the backbone, are irregular bones that protect the spinal cord. Okay, so the vertebral column, class, or the spinal column, protects our spinal cord. So this is the example illustration of the spinal cord. Okay, ito. And this is the bone or the vertebrae that protects the spinal cord. Okay, so the spinal cord, class, is connected to our brain. That's why the spinal cord is the passageway of the messages that are coming in and out of the brain. Okay, so without this spinal cord, kung wala tayong spinal cord, of course, messages cannot be transmitted. And of course, the brain cannot process and interpret all the messages being received. Okay, so spinal cord is very important also. Okay, so again, what protects the spinal cord? It's the spinal column or the vertebral column. Okay, now, class, take note that there are 33 vertebrae in the spinal column of a child. Okay, but as we grow old and become adult, it becomes 26. Okay, so kapag bata, we have 33 vertebrae in the spinal column. And kapag tumanda na tayo, mayroon na lang tayong 26 vertebrae sa ating spinal column. So that is because as the child grows, the last 7 bones join together, okay, to form just 2 bones. That's why we only have 26 vertebrae as we grow old. Okay, so don't forget that one. Now, another part of our actual skeleton is our rib cage. Okay, so as you can see on the picture, class, the rib cage protects the lungs and the heart. Okay, so nandyan siya. Nasa loob siya ng ating rib cage. Right? So the ribs are the bones at the side of the chest. So ilang pairs sa tingin ninyo mayroon ang ribs natin? Any idea? Okay, very good. So there are 12 pairs of ribs that protect our hearts and our lungs. Okay, so dun sa 12 pairs of ribs natin, class, the upper 7 pairs of ribs, ito, class, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, are considered true ribs. Why? Because they are connected to the breastbone. Okay? And below that, meron tayong 3 pair pa rin dito, and we call those as false ribs. Okay? And the last pair, class, as you can see, ito, last 2 pairs, hindi siya connected sa ating breastbone. Okay, that's why we call it as floating ribs. Okay, so we call the last two pairs that are not connected to our breastbone as floating ribs. Okay, so take note of that. Now, let's have this time the parts of our appendicular skeleton. Okay, so first we have the scapula. Okay, so the scapula is the shoulder bone found at the back of our shoulder. Okay, so as you can see here on the picture, it is really found at the back of our shoulder. Second, we have the pelvic bones. So the pelvic bone supports the lower parts of the body and aid the movement of our legs. Okay, so that is the function of our pelvic bone. Okay, so next we have the third one, the humerus. Right? So ito yung humerus natin, class. Yan. Okay, so the upper arm, class, has one long bone. Ito. Alright? Which is called now the humerus. Okay? And as you can see sa baba, meron tayong two bones na nakikita. Ito, class. Yung two bones natin. At anong tawag natin dyan? Those are radius and ulna. Now, saan dyan sa dalawa ang radius at ang ulna? So, this is the radius, class. Okay? Yan ang ating radius. Now, what is radius? Radius is one of the two large bones of the forearm. Again, radius is one of the two large bones of the forearm. And, of course, yung katabi ni radius, that is our ulna. And take note that ulna is slightly longer and thicker than the radius. Okay, so dyan natin matatagpuan ang ating ulna at ang ating radius. Okay, below the humerus. Okay, next we have our wrists. So the wrist, class, connects the hand to the forearm, of course. So now, the wrist, class, or the carpal consists of 8 bones, and the metacarpal naman, class, consists of only 5 bones. Okay? Now, what are found inside the bone? Do you have any idea? Ano nga ba ang nakikita natin inside our bones? Very good. So inside the bones, class, are the bone marrow. Okay, and this bone marrow, class, are very important in manufacturing or producing blood cells for the body. Okay, so it produces stem cells like the red blood cells, the platelets, and the white blood cells. Okay, now we have two types of bone marrow, class. First, we have the red bone marrow, and second, we have the yellow bone marrow. Now, what is the difference between these two types of bone marrow? Okay, so when we say red bone marrow, class, of course, it can be found in our humerus, in our femur, in our pelvis, and vertebrae. And also, our red bone marrow, class, take note that it contains the blood stem cells. These are the blood stem cells that can form or that can become the red blood cells, the platelets, and the white blood cells. And on the other hand, class, we have the yellow bone marrow. And when we say bone marrow, it can be found in many bones. Okay, so take note, class, that this yellow bone marrow is the storage of fats. Okay, so again, when we say red bone marrow, it contains the stem cells like red blood cells, white blood cells, and the platelets. And when we say yellow bone marrow, it is the storage of fats. So that is our skeletal system. So without skeleton, class, we could not stand and we cannot even move. Okay, so we cannot be able to do anything. Right? So our body would collapse, and of course, the internal organs like our brain, our heart, and our lungs would not function well. So our skeletal system is very important also. Okay? I hope that's clear. Okay, now let's proceed to the next system, and that is the integumentary system. Now, what is integumentary system? When we say integumentary system, it is composed of organs that form the external covering of the body and protect it from many threats such as infection, desiccation, abrasion, chemical assault, and radiation damage. So in other words, class, our integumentary system consists of our skin, our hair, our fingernails, our glands, and our nerves. So it says here, class, acting to protect the body from various kinds of damage. Alright? So that is the main function of the integumentary system, class. That is to act as a barrier to protect the body from the outside world. Alright? Okay, so next, it is also made of specialized cells that secrete melanin to protect the body from the carcinogenic effects of the ultraviolet rays and cells that have an immune function. So what does this melanin mean? Ano bang ibig sabihin natin kapag sinabi nating melanin? So when we say melanin, this is responsible for the skin color. Okay, it is responsible for the skin color. It is the pigment, okay, that determines the color of our skin. That is the melanin. And also, class, our integumentary system functions to retain the body fluids, protect against disease, eliminate waste products, and regulate the body temperature. That's why, class, sweat glands is also a part of integumentary system. Why? Because sweat glands excrete waste and regulate the body temperature. So we will be learning more all of these as we go on with our lesson. Okay, now, what are the functions of the integumentary system? Okay, so the integumentary system, class, has many functions. Marami yan. But most of which are involved in protecting you and regulating your body's internal functions in a variety of ways. So ano nga ba yung mga functions or major functions ng ating integumentary system? So first, we have, class, protects the body's internal living tissues and organs. So that is the primary function of the integumentary system. That is to protect the inside of the body from the elements in the environment, such as we have the bacteria. We also have pollution, okay? And of course, the harmful ultraviolet rays from the sun, okay? Second, we have protects against invasion by infectious organisms. So just like what I have said a while ago, class, it protects the inside of the body from the infectious organisms like we have the bacteria. Okay? Third, we have protects the body from dehydration. Bakit kaya? Because, class, take note that the integumentary system provides a waterproof layer. Okay? It provides a waterproof layer to keep water inside the body. So as I said a while ago, class, the integumentary system consists of the skins, the nails, the hairs, glands, and nerves. Okay? So among these, class, sa skin, sa hair, sa nails, sa nerves, sa glands, among those, what do you think protects the body from dehydration? Very good. So that is our skin. So among those, class, it is the skin that protects the body from dehydration. So the skin is waterproof, class, because its outer layer contains protein called the keratin and the glycolipids. Okay, so we will be talking more about skin, class, as we go deeper with our discussion this morning. Okay, and next we also have protects the body against abrupt changes in temperature, helps dispose of waste materials, acts as a reservoir for touch, pressure, pain, heat, and cold. And also, it stores water and fat. So all of these, class, are the functions of our integumentary system. Now, I have a question, class. What do you think is the largest organ in the body? What is the largest organ in the body? Do you have any idea? Very good. So that is skin. Okay? So all of the organs in the body, class, the largest organ is the skin. Right? So when we say skin, it covers the entire human body to protect the body tissues against injuries and help regulate the body temperature by making the pores larger or smaller. So just like what I've said a while ago, class, our skin protects the body from dehydration. Bakit ulit? Because our skin is waterproof. Okay, and its outer layer contains the protein called the keratin and the glycolipids. Okay, now class, the skin also consists of three layers. Now, what are these three layers of the skin? So the three layers of the skin class are, first we have the epidermis, dermis, and the subcutaneous. By the way, the subcutaneous layer of the skin class is also called the hypodermis. Okay? Now, what are the differences and functions of these three? So first, we go to the epidermis. So when we say epidermis class, it is the outermost layer of the skin. So as you can see, this is the epidermis class, yung nasa taas. That is the outermost layer of the skin. And this epidermis class acts as a barrier against light and energy, and it also protects the body from water loss, microorganisms, and many chemicals. Next, we have epidermis contains cells that produce melanin, protein, and keratin, and it also helps protect the body against infection. Okay, now, what is melanin again? What is it responsible for? Very good. So, it is responsible for the skin color. So, in other words, melanin is a pigment that determines the color of our skin. Okay, and this melanin class, take note that it protects the skin by absorbing the ultraviolet rays from the sun. So, kung mas marami tayong melanin, mas protected tayo from the sun. So, the people with darker complexion class have more melanin. Okay, and so, they have more protection from the sun. Okay, and we also have the deepest layer or the part of the epidermis. Okay, now what is this deepest layer or the deepest part of the epidermis? That is what we call the regenerative layer. So again, the deepest part or the deepest layer of the epidermis is the regenerative layer, wherein this generates new cells that can give rise to all other cell layers in the epidermis. So that is the first layer of the skin, the epidermis. Again, it is the outermost layer of the skin, and it protects the body from the environment like the infectious organisms and, of course, the harmful ultraviolet rays from the sun. And we go to the second layer of the skin, that is the dermis. So if the epidermis class is the outermost layer of the skin, the dermis is the thickest layer of our skin. So as you can see on the picture class, it is found below the epidermis. And when we say dermis class, it nourishes the epidermis. So why does it nourishes the epidermis? Because it helps the skin stretch and stay firm. That's why dermis nourishes the epidermis. Okay? And third, we have, it contains the sweat glands, oil glands, hair follicles, nerves, and the blood vessels. Okay, so what are these sweat glands, oil glands, hair follicles, nerves, and blood vessels that are found in the thickest layer of the skin, which is the dermis? Okay, so first we have the sweat glands. Okay, so what does this sweat gland mean? Now, sweat glands class is also called the sudoriferous glands. So these are the small tubular structures of the skin that produces sweats. Okay, so in other words, these sweat glands class produce moisture, which is called the perspiration. Ito na yung mga pawis. Dito lumalabas ang ating mga pawis. Okay, so ito na yung sweat na tinatawag natin that reaches the skin surface through the pores and evaporates to cool the body. Okay, so that is the sweat gland. Next, we also have the sebaceous gland. Take note, class, that sebaceous glands are also called our oil glands. Okay, so this secretes oil that lubricates the skin and hair, which enhances the barrier function of the skin against dirt and germs. So take note, class, that this oil is what we call sebum. Okay, so this sebum class helps to keep the hair and the skin soft and waterproof. Okay, so that is our sebaceous glands, or what we call our oil glands. So anong tawag natin dun sa oil na nasa-secrete? That is what we call the sebum. Now class, look at this picture. Hair follicle can also be found in the dermis layer. Okay? Can be found in the dermis layer. Now, what is hair? When we say hair, it is a slender, flexible structure found on the surface of the skin. Okay, now, I have a question, class. Natatakpan ba ng mga buhok ang lahat ng katawan natin? Of course, the answer is no. Okay? If no, what parts of our body is not covered with hair? Very good. Our body is covered with hair except the palms of our hands and the soles of our feet. So kung napapansin nyo, wala tayong buhok dito. At sa talampakan, wala din tayong buhok. Okay? Now, as you can see in this illustration class, hair has parts, right? So what is the anatomy of our hair, or what are the parts of our hair? So first class is we have our hair root, or what we call the hair bulb. So ito na yung ating hair root, or what we call the hair bulb. So when we say hair root or hair bulb, it is the part of hair below the surface of the skin. So in other words, class, hair root, or what we call the hair bulb, it is the base of the hair follicle. So dito nag-i-start na mag-grow ang ating hair follicle, class. And ito yung hair follicle natin. Okay? Ito yung hair follicle natin. And this hair follicle, class, anchors each hair into the skin. And from the hair bulb, class, and the hair follicle, of course, the hair will extend, and that is what we call now the hair shaft. Take note, hair shaft is the visible part of the skin that protrudes through the skin. So that is the anatomy of the hair. Now, hair has many functions, right? Now, what do you think is the function of the hair in our nose and in our ears? Very good. So, the hair in our nose and in our ears, class, filter the dust particles. Okay? Now, how about our eyebrow? What is the function of that? Very good. So, our eyebrow protects our eyes from sweat. So, kapag tutulo ang ating pawis dito, meron tayong our eyebrow para i-protect ang ating eye, para hindi mapunta ang mga pawis sa loob ng ating mata. Okay? Now, how about the function of our facial hair? Ito, yung mga facial hair natin. Very good. So, the facial hair, class, reduces the skin's exposure to ultraviolet rays. Okay, so mahalagang meron tayong hairs dito, wag nating tatanggalin. Okay, and how about the hair in our scalp, class? Very good. So it protects our head and the skull from abrasion, okay, which is a type of an open wound caused by rubbing. Now, have you noticed, class, that some people have darker hair? Bakit kaya? Bakit kaya yung iba may mga dark hair? Very good. So, it's because of the melanin. So, the hair color, class, depends on the amount of melanin people have. So, the more melanin, class, the darker will be the hair color. Okay, so that's why old people tend to have gray hair or white hair, because as they grow older, less melanin is being produced. So, kokonti na lang yung melanin. Okay, so that is all about the second layer of the skin, dermis. Right, so again, when we say dermis, it is the thickest layer of the skin found below the epidermis. And again, in this layer, class, sweat glands, the sebaceous glands, the hair follicles, the blood vessels, and the nerves can be found. Okay, take note, class, that nerves can also be found in the dermis, which is essential for sensations such as touch, pain, heat, and pressure of the skin. So, dermis too aids in sensation. Okay? Now, the third layer of the skin is what we call the subcutaneous layer, or what we call the hypodermis layer. So, what does this mean? So, when we say subcutaneous or the hypodermis, it is the deepest or the innermost layer of the skin, which serves as the storage of food for energy in the form of fats. So, ito yung subcutaneous natin. Okay? So, in other words, class, it is the layer of fat below the dermis layer. Okay? And aside from serving as the storage of food for energy in the form of fats, this layer, class, also serves as the insulator of heat. So, in other words, it insulates the body from called? So that is the subcutaneous or the hypodermis layer. Okay, so those are the three layers of the skin: the epidermis, the dermis, and the subcutaneous layer. Okay, next we go to the third system, and that is our digestive system. Okay, now, isn't it, we always eat food, right? And all the food we intake in our body are being broken down into smaller pieces and be digested. Now, have you ever wondered, class, how the food we eat breaks down into smaller pieces? So that breaking down of food into smaller pieces, class, is the work of the organs found in our digestive system. Now, class, my question is, what do you call the process of breaking down of food into smaller pieces? What do you think? Very good. So that is digestion. Okay, so digestion, class, is the process of breaking down and dissolving food for the use of body cells. Okay, now, digestion has two types. We have the mechanical digestion and the chemical digestion. Now, what is the difference between these two? When we say mechanical digestion, it is the food that is broken down into smaller pieces in the mouth through the action of our teeth and thumb. While when we say chemical digestion, it is the food that is being broken down into nutrients and other substances that can be absorbed by the body. Okay, so in other words, class, kapag sinabi nating mechanical digestion, gumagamit tayo ng organs or ng parts of the body para ma-digest ang food. Okay, so parts or organs of the body like our mouth and our teeth, nandyan din ang tongue natin. So kapag chemical digestion naman, class, isa siyang process na kung saan kapag na-intake na natin yung food, it will be broken down into smaller pieces or substances, and the nutrients now, class, will be absorbed by the body. Okay? Magkakalat na siya. That is chemical digestion. Alright? So those are the two types of digestion. The mechanical digestion and the chemical digestion. Now, what is a digestive system? So when we say digestive system, class, it is made up of group of organs that work together to digest food so it can be used by the body. So all of our organs, class, will work together to get all the nutrients from the food we eat. Okay? And digestive system consists of the mouth, the esophagus, the stomach, the rectum, we also have the anus, small intestines, and large intestines. Okay? So these organs, class, like the mouth, the esophagus, the stomach, the rectum, the anus, small intestines, and large intestines, they all help in digesting our food. Okay? And these organs will work together to break down the food we eat into smaller pieces for the use of our body. So for you to be familiarized, class, with the different parts of the digestive system, let's have this activity. So you are going to identify the numbered parts in the illustration. Okay, so number 1, ano kayang part ito? Very good. So that is our mouth. Okay, number 2, what is this? That is our large intestines. Very good. Number 3, what do we call this one? That is the esophagus. How about number 4? Ano ang tawag natin dito? That is our stomach. Very good. How about this number 5? What is this? That is our small intestines. Very good. For number 6, what do we call this one? Is that anus or rectum? Very good. That is rectum. And of course, this one is our anus. Very good. Okay, so please familiarize yourselves with the parts of the digestive system and where these parts are located. Okay, now let's go first with the mouth. Okay, so actually, class, the digestion begins in our mouth. Okay, of course, with the help or with the use of our teeth and our tongue, wherein the teeth will grind and it will cut the food, and our tongue naman will help the food to move in the mouth while chewing. And also our tongue will help push. Okay, it will help push the food into the esophagus when swallowing. Okay? Now, anong kailangan natin para mas madaling matunaw ang mga pagkaing nginunguya natin? Very good. So it's the saliva or the laway. Okay? So this saliva class is a liquid in the mouth that moistens and softens the food, which contains an enzyme that helps digest starch and change it into sugar. Okay? So when chewing class, the food is softened and it is moistened by the saliva from the salivary glands. And this saliva class contains an enzyme that digests starch and change into sugar. Now, this enzyme class in the saliva is called ptyalin. Okay, again, this ptyalin as an enzyme in the saliva helps in the digestion of the starch. Okay, now, kapag naswallow na natin yung food na nginunguya natin, ano nang next? Saan na mapupunta ito? Very good. So, after sa mouth, when the food is swallowed, class, it travels to the esophagus. Okay, so this is our esophagus, class. And this is how the food travels into it. Okay, so the esophagus, class, is a long, straight muscular tube that connects the mouth to the stomach. So now, class, the chewed and swallowed food, ito, class, is what we call bolus. Okay, so bolus na yung tawag natin dyan. Right? Now, the esophagus squeezes and pushes the food down to the stomach through the contraction and relaxation movements of the muscle. Now, this squeezing movement of the muscles is called the peristalsis. Okay, so again, class, in short, peristalsis is the squeezing movement of the muscles. So it is the squeezing movement through the contraction and relaxation of the muscles. Okay? Now, after the food or the bolus travels to the esophagus, class, the bolus enters to the stomach. Alright? Now, the stomach, class, is a large pear-shaped organ that can temporarily expand to store the food. Okay, so in other words, the stomach is a muscular pouch or a pear-shaped made of muscles that secretes gastric juice. Okay, and these gastric juices, class, help in breaking down proteins and destroy microorganisms in the food. Okay, so again, class, in the stomach, the food is broken down into smaller pieces with the help of gastric juices. Okay, and the gastric juices will act on the food, and it breaks down the food and split up the proteins and the fats. Now, from the stomach, class, the food goes to the small intestines. Okay, and these are the small intestines. And these small intestines is a 7-meter long and 2.5-centimeter wide coiled tube in the lower abdomen where the food is finally digested and absorbed. So most of the digestion, class, takes place in the small intestine. Okay, so small intestine, it is where the final digestion happens. Take note of that. It is in the small intestine that the final digestion takes place. Okay? And also, the small intestines absorb the nutrients from the food and prepares it for the circulation throughout the body. Okay? Now, what will happen to the undigested food? Anong mangyayari dun sa mga hindi natunaw? Okay? So, the undigested food particles, class, will go to the large intestines. And also take note, class, that the large intestines store water. Okay, so in the large intestine, the water from the undigested food is being absorbed. Okay, now, yung mga mahirap na ma-digest ay mababroken down hanggang yung mga parts na hindi naman na useful o hindi naman na kailangan sa katawan natin, lahat ng yun ay maiiwan. Okay, at yun na yung mga wastes na tinatawag natin. Yun na yung mga waste na di na kailangan ng katawan natin. Okay? And then, these waste, class, will be expelled from the body in the form of feces. So, ito na yung tinatawag nating feces. So, these feces, class, are the waste products of digestion that are stored in the lower parts of the large intestines. Okay, so in other words, class, these are the solid wastes that are collected in the rectum and eliminated through the anus. Okay, now from that, you can see the difference between rectum and anus. So rectum, it is where the solid wastes or the feces are being collected. And in the anus, it is where the feces or the solid wastes are being eliminated. Okay? So the process of eliminating these solid wastes or feces in the body is what we call now the defecation or the bowel movement. Okay? Again, defecation or bowel movement is the process of eliminating the solid waste in the body. Okay, so that is how digestion happens inside our body, of course, with the help of the digestive system. Okay, so to see whether you really understood the digestive system, you need to choose from the list of words above to complete the statements. Okay, so the process of breaking down the food that can be absorbed for the use of the body is called digestion. Digestion starts in the mouth. The blank as an enzyme moistens the food. That is the ptyalin. Now from the mouth, the food enters the esophagus. That is a long muscular tube that starts from the back of your throat. Now, the food then travels to the stomach, where it is broken down into smaller pieces. And the food is pushed down the esophagus into the stomach by the rhythmic wave-like movements known as, these are the squeezing movements, peristalsis. The food now goes to the small intestines, that is a 7-meter coiled long tube in the lower abdomen, okay, where the final digestion takes place. And the undigested food goes to the large intestines. Now, the undigested food is being eliminated through the anus. Okay? At yung rectum, that is where the solid waste are being collected. Okay, very good. Now, I have here sets of questions and you need to answer it correctly. First, where do life begins? Is it A, protoplasm, B, tissue, C, cell, or D, biosphere? So life begins in a protoplasm. Next, what level in the organization of life is being coined as the world of life? Population, biosphere, community, or organism? It is the biosphere. So from the word bio, it means life. Next, how many bones does a human have, particularly an adult? Is it 300, 250, 206, or 205? It's 206. Okay, so kapag baby or infant, about 300 bones ang mayroon. But as we grow older, our bones are being fused together. That's why our bones now have only, that's why we only have 206 bones na lang kapag naging adult na ang isang tao. Next, we have, this is the pigment that determines the color of one's skin. Is it ptyalin, melasma, amylase, or melanin? Very good. Letter D, it's melanin. Okay, so that is responsible for the skin color. Now, next we have, what does rib cage protect? Is it liver, the stomach, the lungs and heart, or the intestines? Very good. So, the rib cage protects our lungs and heart. Next, we have, what is the longest bone in the body? The femur, the stapes, the radius, or the clavicle? Very good. That's femur. Okay, the longest bone in the body. And the smallest bone in our body can be found in our ear, and that is stapes. Okay, next, the layer of the skin that stores food for energy and fats. Is it epidermis, subcutaneous, dermis, or derma? Very good. That is subcutaneous, or what we call the hypodermis. Next, this is considered as the largest organ in the body. Skin, femur, ear, or heart? Very good. So that is skin. That is the largest organ in our body. Next, where does digestion begin? Is it in the stomach, in the large intestines, in the esophagus, or in our mouth? Very good. So the digestion begins in our mouth. Okay, with the use of course, or with the help of our teeth and our tongue. Next, this is the squeezing movement of the muscles through contraction and relaxation. Is it constipation, secretion, segmentation, or peristalsis? Very good. So the squeezing movement is the peristalsis movement. Next is, where does the final digestion take place? Is it in the anus, in the rectum, in the large intestines, or in the small intestines? Very good. So the final digestion takes place in the small intestines. All right. So with that, I can say that you really understood our lesson for today. Okay. So those are the first three body systems of human. We have the skeletal system, the integumentary system, and the digestive system. Okay. So thank you for listening and see you again next week.